Hello and welcome back to the channel, and thank you for joining me in another of my wonderful interviews. Today I want to discuss a petition. A petition has been put forward to change the oath of allegiance from the King, that's King Charles, to the people by the police and the military. And you may think, wow, that sounds like a very good idea. Now, in fact, the chap who's launched this petition, and it's got something in the region of 2,600 odd signatures already, did get in touch with the show and say he would like to come on and talk about it. And now, I had already seen his YouTube channel where it came up. Let me just show that to you. Here he is, and you may have seen it yourselves if you've been watching. He's on YouTube, and that's him, David Bizley. So he's been in touch. This has only been up since the 9th of March, as you can see down at the bottom there, and has already got 72,000 views, which is fantastic. So, you know, he's got the opinion out. So he got in touch with me and he said, Richard, I'd love to come on the show and talk about this petition because I think it's very important. The country's going down the pan. We shouldn't be having the king with our allegiance to him because he doesn't seem to be working for the people. And the military and the police all have their oath to him. They should have it to the people themselves. And I thought, well, I've been looking at this in a slightly different way, thanks to my friend Clive Edwards, who's been on the show. We've already done 2 versions. And we did one fairly recently about petitions. And this is the actual petition. Here we are. 2,949 at the time of recording, and that may well go up, of course. And it lasts here for 6 months, it says, and it needs at least 10,000 signatures, and the government will respond at 100,000 signatures. The petition will be considered for debate. So that's how these things work. But Clive and I did a podcast, and we'll link to it in the description, where we said that actually petitions are not as valuable tool as you might think, and they're in the wrong jurisdiction. And so we're going to go and explore all of this. And Clive joins me now. Hello, Clive.
Hi, Richard. Thanks for inviting me back on to talk about petitions. Yeah.
Well, it went down so interestingly last time that you were on about petitions, and we were just talking in general. Now that we've got a specific one, where I thought to myself, hang on a minute, I'm sure Clive has got a few comments about this because I think the jurisdictions are slightly jumbled up here.
Yeah. You sent me the link and mentioned about having a chat about this petition. And I think I'm glad that the guy's been in touch with you. And I think it's really healthy to have these debates in the public arena, because my feeling is that a lot of the general public don't truly understand how petitions work, because the feeling behind, I get the impression behind, and the guy's pretty much said it himself, that this petition is a petition for the people, and that he wants the British military and the police to swear allegiance to the people. Well, probably when we go through this discussion here today, we're going to get to the understanding that that's a flawed presumption from the off. And we'll explain why, because it's a really, really serious and important point at law, because there's only 2 things you can be at law. And we'll get onto this. We've spoke about it. We touched on it in our previous discussion with the 2 tiers of state. There's only 2 things you can be. You can either be a people under God or a person of the state. And obviously we'll explore that a little bit further.
And we've got a web page here, which I'm going to point out. We're going to work through this because it's just worth going through. You've laid it out, and we'll make that publicly available, of course, and people can either watch it as we go. The link will be in the description, or just watch it on the video and have a listen to it. So I'm basically going to read out the bit, which is quite structured, giving the evidence, but I may stop and just clarify points with Clive as we go. And let me just say, I have extended and offered David to come on the show after we've published this, if he wants to rebut any points or have his own point of view come across, or talk about why he wanted the petition in the first place. So I don't know whether he will, but I have said, you're very, very welcome to do that. So the page that we're looking at here, which you will find the link in the description, you may find it familiar as we've done this sort of thing before, the capillary wave, and this is the 3rd one. There's some bald bloke, we don't need to worry too much about him. And it's discussing the merits of a petition that intends to change the police and military oaths. And we'll some of it we will skirt through quite quickly, because you can go back and look at this yourselves, because we have spoken about this in previous videos. But what's important is to take on board the sort of process of understanding, I guess. And you're very good at putting this together, Clive, particularly in the form of the web page.
Yeah, well, I like to have some structure to these discussions. I've said before, one of my pet peeves is people that come on the internet and talk and give lots of opinion, and then the audience is left hanging as to where do I find out more about it? Well, I'm the opposite to that, because I like to bring the evidence and list it all out, so people got something to get their teeth into after the discussion, or to follow along the discussion and to explore in their own time a bit later.
Yeah. Brilliant. Okay, so let me just bring this page back up, because time just disappears when we're talking, and sometimes it's very easy to leave out the point. So I'll just quickly read through it. So here we go. Introduction. The petition that has sparked this discussion between Richard and myself, or in fact Clive and myself, is the petition to change the military and police oath of allegiance. The author of the petition is David Bizley, as we said, and he has invited a wider public discussion about it, which is what we're doing. In principle, David would like to remove the monarch from the new oath and replace the king with the British people, and to protect our Christian heritage. Richard and I will discuss the issues surrounding this proposal, whether it has any merit, and we'll look at the likelihood of its success. And that there was a very important bit, wasn't it? That he wants to remove the king and replace it with the British people.
Yeah, obviously that's something that's quite revolutionary, to say the least. And what I like about it is that it allows discussion for why the king is there and why it's important to have a monarch, or not important, as the case may be. But we'll put some evidence together which will leave the audience and David himself with hopefully sort of a broader picture of what the king's all about, and why we might need one.
Right. So here we go. We've got the premises of the discussion, which we've kind of covered in this petition notes online. The petition, David Bizley states, I put forward the suggestion that the oath of our military and our police needs to be changed. And he gives what he would like it to be changed to, which is, I do solemnly swear to protect and serve the British people, British democracy and English common law, and to protect the land and the borders of the British Isles against hostile forces that would seek, whether by force or sedition, to usurp the British Constitution or our Christian heritage. Now, on the face of that, you'd think, well, that sounds pretty reasonable, doesn't it? Unless you understand what some of those terms really mean. And that's where it comes to the crux of it, if I am correct. So we'll move quickly on then. Some interesting questions based upon the petition aims are, how does our Christian heritage affect the way in which we are governed in our laws? And some people might think, well, it doesn't really, but this is where they might well be surprised. What would it mean for law and governance if the king was removed from the oath, which we just sort of touched upon? And why does the author of the petition seemingly wish to remove God from the oaths, which I think is going to be a fascinating thing to look at? Does the author, by implication, consider himself one of the people, despite being in a position to sign and launch a legal petition? Are British citizens and UK residents the same, legally speaking, as people? And is it the government's duty to serve the citizens? So these are some of the questions we're going to come up to. There is the petition as we saw. So here we got the original position. Do you want to tell us a little bit about this?
Yeah, this is a kind of similar. See, what I've put this other petition together with David's petition because it's of a similar kind of ilk, and I would imagine a lot of your audience feel the same. Phrases such as "the government are there to serve the people." These comments are common, and they're misunderstood by the general public because the government are there to serve the people, but they've got another job, and that's to rule over, like with an iron fist, over citizens. And we're sort of definitely feeling the heat of that, I would say, at the moment.
We
And
certainly have.
so David's petition talks about serving the British people. And this petition here that I've also evidenced is a petition that says, "We the people hereby withdraw our consent to be governed or policed." Well, we're going to get on to discuss. Like I said, it comes down to people and persons. There's only two things you can be: either one of God's people or a person of the state. And those are the two tiers of state which we spoke about before, which we'll go on to evidence a bit here. So
And
yes, sorry, Richard.
I was going to say, it's interesting that this petition was rejected, and I guess ultimately the government, when it comes to petitions, have the final say.
Yeah, this petition I'm going to put forward was rejected because it says, "We the people hereby withdraw consent to be governed." Well, I can tell you categorically that people aren't governed by UK government; persons are. This petition is flawed from the outset. No one who is a people can even sign and launch and author a petition to government. Only a British citizen and UK resident can. So you cannot be in the capacity of a people and sign and launch a legal petition. So we'll get into that, I'm sure.
Absolutely. So here is a link to the current police oath that the petitioners wish to change. Now, I do have a viewer who is a serving police officer that I know about, and there may be other constables out there who will say this. And the oaths do change, and in fact, the constable who I spoke to, in fact, had a lovely drink and a pipe full in my very house, did tell me that since the Queen died, he has not, and he should have, or should be asked to, renew his oath under the King, and he hasn't been asked to do that. But so as a I suppose a cross-party oath that serves the purpose of what we're saying, it says here, sorry if I'm messing up this. The screen in front of me is not as clear as I would like. I do solemnly and sincerely declare and affirm that I will well and truly serve the Queen, of course it would be the King these days, in the office of constable with fairness, integrity, diligence and impartiality, holding fundamental human rights according to equal respect to all people, and that I will, to the best of my power, cause peace to be kept and preserved and prevent all offences against people and property, and that while I continue to hold the said office, I will, to the best of my skill and knowledge, discharge all the duties thereof faithfully according to law. That's a very powerful oath.
Very powerful. And they're there. A constable's there to protect the people, and a police officer, which is, you've got a policeman's got two roles, two hats to wear, if you like. One is a police constable, where liability is they're under personal liability, and that's what this oath is. On the constable side, they are there to protect the people, whereas a police officer is a policy enforcer, and they're there working for the state. That they have no jurisdiction with the people, so to speak.
So the second oath, here is a link to the current military oath, and you can click on it, of course. And it says here, for the first time in 70 years, British Army recruits have sworn their oaths of allegiance to a king, known as the assertion. Is that right? Assertion ceremony. Each recruit reads aloud their promise to be loyal to the monarch, and it says here, as you can see, I swear by mighty God that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to His Majesty King Charles III, his heirs and successors, and that I will, as in duty bound, honestly and faithfully defend His Majesty, his heirs and successors in person, crown and dignity against all enemies, and will observe and obey all orders of His Majesty, his heirs and successors, and the generals and officers set over me. And so that's the military one. So these are the two oaths that the David would like to change in his petition. So as we go down the webpage here that you can look at, we get the things that we're going to talk about: the evidencing the fundamentals of law and governance. What do the state actors require as supreme authority? the two-tier state, which we've actually covered in a previous video, but we'll have a quick look at that, a summary of the evidence presented, and a rebuttal to the merits of the petition and others. So let's crack on. Evidencing the fundamentals of law and governance. And this is the important bit, because we're giving evidence of where the authority comes from. That's correct, isn't it?
Yeah, there is a structure to law and governance. It's not something, I mean, this, our society's been built on these principles for like a very long time. So they're well established. And this part of my rebuttal, if you like, is that not enough of the general public understand how they're being governed. And that's why I launched the website, because a lot of people are confused. They think they're people, they think the government's there to serve them, yet they're citizens of the state. You can't be a citizen of the state and one of the people. That's like oil and water. It won't work.
Right, so the information discussed here applies right across the English-speaking world, especially as most all Commonwealth countries are under the rule of the Crown and King Charles. These fundamental principles on law and governments will also apply to the United States of America and Americans. Before we get into the more complicated aspects of how we're governed and how the law works, often against us, as we all probably know that, I always feel that it's best, these are Clive's words, of course, I always feel it's best to set out the basic fundamentals regarding how a society is set up and evidence what principles it's based upon. With the Western world being known as Christendom, it is not hard to imagine that the Bible plays an important role in law and governance. But just how important and how far does that book impact on our lives and the governments of the world? I think this is where we get into some really interesting stuff. I've written a few articles which explains in simple terms the fundamental principles of law and governance and how it operates against us. The articles will explain some of the early building blocks that will help all citizens begin to understand how they are being governed. This is not taught in school or university, but is vital information for you and your family and will catapult your knowledge on this subject matter. Here are some of those initial articles, and so you can link on those if you go to the web page. So let's go down to this. Now, my French is not great. How do you pronounce this?
Dieu est mon droit. Mine's not that great either, but that's my best stab at it, and it means God and my right.
And so here we see a familiar crest, and it says here, many will be familiar with the emblem pictured above. However, not many will be familiar with the French motto underneath it or what it means. The motto, could you give it again in your wonderful French?
Dieu est mon droit.
Thank you. Means God and my right. This emblem and motto hangs in every courtroom in the United Kingdom in Britain. Notice that's in capital letters there. And is usually above where a judge sits in the courtroom. The motto itself evidences that God is involved in state affairs and the law. The Bible itself states at Romans 13:1 in the King James Version 16:11, that's the authorized version, let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, for there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God. This is a very fundamental thing, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, every courtroom in the country, every magistrate's court, every crown court that you go to, underneath, above where a judge is sat, you'll be looking at that crest in one form or another, and that motto. It's telling you right there that God's involved. God's in the courtroom, and most people don't realize. And but a court case is your test on the Bible, in shorthand. That's what it is. But obviously, many people don't realize that, and we'll get on to explain how important, how far the reach of the Bible it impacts our daily lives, even if you're an atheist. So we'll get into that, I'm sure.
Fantastic. So, just to carry on, it is because the powers that be are ordained by God that we have the above motto in courtrooms, and government ministers working out of government ministries across the Western English-speaking world. And it's interesting that you have highlighted those, because we use language is something that we use, and sometimes we forget those etymologies of the words and where they've come from.
Absolutely, yeah. These words that are orange on the webpage here are linked, and you can go in and look at the word definitions. Everything in orange is linked, so it's evidenced. And yeah, you're right. We've been brought up with these terms. Because we've heard them so often since we were knee high, we don't really give them much thought. And I didn't either until I sort of started reading the Bible, and I put two and two together. That the powers that be are ordained by God. Well, the powers that be are the government, and we and some of their officers and offices are ministers and ministries. So it starts to sort of make sense when you
Yeah.
look at it from a biblical perspective.
This is why at the Queen's coronation, Elizabeth, capital letters, wears two hats of office, and of course we now have Charles. One is the St. Edward's crown of God. The other is the imperial Roman crown of state. The St. Edward's crown symbolizes subservience to no one but God. Imperial means Roman, and since the state governs by Roman civil law, this crown symbolizes the king as the head of state over his subject, his subjects being the citizens and persons of the state. And many people call themselves I am a citizen or I am a person or whatever. We move down here to becoming a person. Now, again, we have looked at this in previous videos, but it's worth just quickly going over this. A person of the state goes against what is commanded in the Bible's 10 commandments, which can be read in Exodus 21, which says, are you able to read those to us? Because I'm sure you're...
Yeah, it's well, we don't need to go. There's evidence there,
Right.
and yeah, by becoming a person, the Bible warns lots of places, and I've spoke about this in nearly every podcast I've done. The Bible warns the reader about becoming a man's person, accepting man's person, because to become a person is to become a subject of a king. In this discussion, and the webpage will explain it in greater detail. But so you're breaking the first commandment. It's like to have no other gods before me, and that's a small g god. That god is an earthly god, which is defined as kings, judges, and rulers. So by becoming a subject of the king, you've broken the first commandment. You're a
Yes.
subject of a king when you should be subject to the King of Kings, Christ.
And that comes with the free will to make that choice.
Absolutely, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. You've got the choice to do as you will, but you will pay the price of our. Their actions have consequences.
Yes, absolutely. Right. Okay. So here we go. The Bible warns against being a person, as you just said, accepting man's titles at many places, and titles being like Mister and Lord and all these different titles that people get. And here are two examples. In Job, we see here, let me not, I pray you, accept any man's person, neither let me give flattering titles unto man, for I know not to give flattering titles. In doing so, my Maker would soon take me away. And in Acts, we have, then Peter opened his mouth and said, of a truth, I perceive that God is no respecter of persons. And of course, you can look these up in the Bible yourself.
That's really important. That Acts quote you've just given there, Acts 10:34, is repeated by the U.S. Supreme Court Judge Brett Kavanaugh. Is the next bit you're coming up to, and he swears an oath to be no respecter of persons. That's a legal judge that you. So it just goes to show that these judges in those courtrooms are no respecters of persons. And if you're able to sign a petition or author a petition, you are a person of the state.
Right. You're not we the people that he
You
thinks he
can't,
is.
that's right. You cannot be we the people if you're in a position to author a petition or sign one, legally speaking. You've foregone your position as of the people of God. We start off subject to God, then we turn our back on God and go on a turn. That's why there's an attorney general. We spoke about this before, and then we go and subject ourselves to another king, and that's forbidden.
So, as you said, we're coming up to the Supreme Court. The legal system and its judges have no respect for persons because of what it states in the Act above. It Acts, as opposed to Acts and Statutes, Acts from the Bible 10:34. Via the link below, you can go and have a look at this, where Supreme Court Judge Brett Kavanaugh is saying no respecter of persons. The legal system are no respecter of persons, and neither is God, and it is warned about and forbidden in the Bible. So we'll explore more about that a little bit later. So now let's get on to the next section here, which is, who do the state actors regard as supreme authority? So that's your prime minister, your king, and all the judges, as you said before. Who do they see who is above them? And here we get some evidence. Judges mark the start of the legal year at Westminster Abbey.
And there's I've linked the service sheet to it there. People can click on that and see it's a church service where they sing and pray to God and all of that. So that's the judges. That's the people we all end up before in court. They're all at church praying to God.
And so, you think, why go through that? Is it, some people may say, oh, it's just a tradition, isn't it? But why would the tradition even begin, even be a thing? Yeah. And why in this modern 21st century of sophistication and digital this, that and the other, would they bother unless there was something in it?
Absolutely, yeah. The society across the Western world, and I would say across the whole globe, is based upon the Bible.
So now MP take prayers before anything happens in Parliament. And as you can see, this is from their webpage, which shows the prayers take place. Sittings in both houses begin with prayers. Again, why would you have all of this, in the House of Commons, unless it meant something? These follow the Christian faith, and there is currently no multi-faith element. Attendance, it does say, is voluntary, but it is provided.
Yeah. So obviously there can be MPs. There are MPs just like citizens of the Sikh faith, of the Muslim faith, of all these different faiths. But the prayer session is only for the Christian, to the Christian God.
Right.
So these Sikhs and Muslims and these other denominations of religious denominations, if they're a UK citizen, they're being governed by the Christian Bible.
Interesting. It's so interesting, because it really just opens people's minds. Again, these things are there for you to see if you've got the eyes to see them, as they say.
Yeah, this isn't I often say this isn't my opinion. I'm just relaying the facts, and we'll put it together on a webpage so everyone can see.
Yeah. So in the House of Commons, you can see there the Speaker chaplain usually reads the prayers, and you can read all that in your leisure. And then in the House of Lords, you've got the senior bishop, Lord Spiritual, who sits in the Lords and usually reads the prayers as well. And you can click on the link on the webpage to do that, and you can see where the photos are sourced, and you can see a video link as the MPs here. MPs swear an oath to God. Then we come to the coronation, and you've got on here the Queen's coronation, but presumably, of course, the King has also gone through that. We all may remember that the King went through a coronation, and there was lots of interesting symbology going on in that. And that was in colour, whereas the Queen's one was in black and white, wasn't it, if you look at the old films.
That's right. I've linked to the Queen's one because there's a much more in-depth documentary I've got that I've linked to, and I've got also the whole service sheet. This is the official service sheet, so I've got all that at hand. Whereas the recent King coronation, I didn't get the full. There wasn't as much information on it, so yeah.
But I do remember watching it, and he is handed the Bible. He's presenting with the Holy Bible. Again, if he's just the king of the people and God doesn't play a role in it, or the Bible, there's no say in the matter, what's the point? Why keep these customs and traditions going unless it has some meaning? And you can, again, read all of that. We haven't got, the greatest amount of time. So, but that's an important thing, isn't it, the coronation?
Absolutely. It's mostly based around the Bible and God. That's just the two sheets there I've evidenced are just snippets from the whole service sheet, and the whole thing is talking about God, the Bible, and people and persons. So yeah, as you say, people can get into that in their own time and dissect that further, but there's two bits of evidence is just you'd have to be blind to not see that it's entirely based upon the Bible.
Yeah. And you sort of sum that up over here. The infallible truth, the Bible is the highest authority on the law and is described in the Confession of Faith Ratification Act as far back as 1560 as the infallible truth. Infallible means exempt from error in judgment, knowledge, or opinion. This book then clearly has importance for all of society and not just Christians. And so this is the book that the government, the king, and everybody have as their rule book, effectively.
Yeah, and if you're a citizen of the United Kingdom, by default, because you're a subject of the king, your boss has said that's the infallible truth, and you do what the boss says. So
Yeah.
if you're a citizen, you've consented to that too.
Okay, so
yeah.
Now, in the previous video, we did go through some of this, but we'll just quickly go through this.
Yeah.
The two-tier state, because people may not quite fully get what this two-tier state, and we often say a two-tier state meaning the rich and the poor. You'll hear that on mainstream media, but this is slightly different because this is about jurisdiction. So here we go. The roles of the state: the king, the judges, police, and councils. There is an operation two-tier state with two-tier policing and two-tier justice. This was something that Clive and I discussed and evidenced a few months back, and the interview is linked there. And of course, I'll put it in the description as well of this one, so you can have a look at it. Two tiers of state exist because there are two things at law that anyone can be. And we sort of hinted at this. Those are a people under God or a person under the state. So it makes sense that there would be two separate jurisdictions to cater for those two separate beings. Those two tiers are shown below in my hand drawing here, and we can have a look at that and maybe just quickly tell us what we're looking at.
Yeah, we won't dwell on this too long because, like you say, we dedicated a whole hour to this not that long ago. But these are just in my hand drawn here, just two jurisdictions, which is evidence. So a king wears two crowns. That he wears a crown of God that serves the people, and the other crown, the imperial crown, signifies his rule over the state persons. And that rolls down to judges. They have two oaths of office, and one of those oaths is for his office of the United Kingdom under the king, where he swears allegiance to the king, and the other oath is it's sworn to God. There's a maxim of law that says judges judge for God. That's a maxim of law. That's a very serious thing. And we've spoken about police officers before. Most people understand that a police officer is also a police constable, two offices for the same guy or girl. And the constable protects the people. That's the oath. The solemn promise, and an oath is a solemn promise to a deity. And on the officer side, they enforce the policies of the United Kingdom, which is a body politic. So the policies are enforced by the policy enforcers on that jurisdiction of the United Kingdom. And that rolls down to your local council. They have a duty to the electorate, which is the voters, which is the citizens, which is those people that can sign and author petitions. You're one of the electorate. You're a subject of the king. And they also have a duty to God's people, which I've evidenced here on this webpage. I've taken a couple of pages out of a local council's constitution, which evidences this plain as day. So the UK jurisdiction for the citizens, that's the legal side, and that's the country of the United Kingdom. And the lawful side under God is the landmass of Britain. But some of my early articles, like the framework of law and governance, goes into that in much more detail that we've got time for here now. But this can be dug. There's all the evidence is here on this webpage for you to dig around and explore it further.
Fantastic. And what would you say, just as we've looked at here, the king, a lot of people are saying, and the reason partly that the petition wants to go ahead is that people are observing the king as if he is not actually working for the people. That would be the perception that a lot of people are getting. And so that's why they think, well, we don't want the king because he doesn't seem to be working for us anymore.
Yeah, well, I don't think, because the king understands how the system works very well, I don't think he would dare to go against everything, the foundation that his kingdom and his kingship is built upon. He's allowed that position from what it says in the Bible. It's like, you can be a king, you can do that, you'll have my grace to do so, but don't break the rules. So like I say, he's got a duty to God's people on one side, but on the other side of his subjects, He's the king. He's the Lord in that relationship, which is what we've explained before in our previous discussions. So he can do what he likes to the persons, because the God is no respect. God is no respecter of persons. Warned us not to become persons, and yet we turned our back on God and became persons anyway. So the king, he can do what they like with them.
Yes.
He's God in that relationship. He's the Lord in that relationship.
So that's why people who do not realize they are persons may get the impression that the king isn't working for them, because he's not
Yeah.
actually working for them.
No.
He is ruling them through his government and his chain of command downwards.
Yeah.
Whereas if you are of the people, he is there to serve you and to serve God.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're one of the citizens, you're a subject, and part of the definition of a subject is you're a vassal of a feudal lord. Well, King Charles is your feudal lord, so don't expect him to be serving you. Your job is to serve him.
So, I mean, nothing has really changed from the days of feudal Britain, really.
This is what the Bible's spoken about and ordered the king to do. Right. So these people, this Christian, it was mentioned in the part of the premise for the launch of this petition was about the Christian heritage. We're
Yes.
discussing Christian heritage. This is
Yes.
straight out of the Bible. But most
Yes.
people don't really realize how they're being governed. And that's part of what I'm here. What I'd like to do is help people understand that. That's why I'm here with, that's my aim anyway.
Yeah. Fantastic. So, and back on the web page here, you can see from the council, this is from the Constitution.
Yeah, that's the council's constitution. We'll just briefly, because the page evidences it itself,
Yeah.
but it says there very clearly about its duty towards the people, the electorate and the people, and it talks about the ward and the ward as a whole. I mean, it's all there. It's very clear to see that's because it would be, wouldn't it? The king's got two duties. He wears two crowns. The judge has got two oaths. He's got two duties. A police officer and a police constable have got two different roles, and so it is with the council. I mean, it's self-evident, I feel, anyway.
Yeah. So, and of course, then that means that the legislation and the acts and statutes and the things like the Local Finance Act 1992 will apply to the persons. It's got nothing to do with the people.
That's right. Yeah.
So that might prick people's ears up and go, oh, does that mean I don't have to pay a certain tax? But that's not the remit of today's video. But that essentially is what it is about. So, number 4, a summary of the evidence presented so far. Let's just quickly go over that then. What does the evidence show about the hierarchy of law and governments? It says there's no question that the Bible is the book of law. I think we've established that now, and the book of truth, and is held as such by all serious state actors, as we've seen. Therefore, what that book says will have profound effect about how we act in our lives, whether we realize this or not. And that's a very important point. Whether we know it or not, it's actually having that effect. One thing the Bible is very clear about is to be no respecter of persons, which we saw, and not accept a man's person. However, becoming a person of state is precisely what happens when we accept the state-issued legal name. Now we're getting on to things that might be more familiar to my audience and a lot of people who do common law. Legal identification, legal fictions, ens legis, those sort of terms, and the lords. And the Bible is very clear that no man can serve two masters, and you'll see the reference there. Very clearly, those who can legally petition, as we've just said, and sign petitions to the government in the first instance are British citizens and UK residents. So David Bizley, as writing and putting this forward, would be a British citizen and UK residents as a person, as evidenced by the UK government rules on petitioning above. British citizens and UK residents are subject to Parliament, as we just said this, the Acts and Statutes, and are under UK state legislation, jurisdiction rather, and are now known as persons at law. And here we go to see the... you leave the jurisdiction of a people under God when you make a new vow and elect to become a British citizen or UK resident under a new king.
Just briefly on that, it's very rare that you get a barrister that's willing to explain some of this to the public. And here, the black belt barrister, I've evidenced where he talks about this, about the consent of the governed. It's a very, very brief clip, but it's a very, very important clip, and he evidences what we're talking about here.
So yeah, and the link is on the page here. It is just at the top there. So we go through the hierarchy of law and governance, which we've evidenced here, that God is at the top. We have Scripture, which of course is the Bible. We have the people. Then we have underneath that the crown, the monarch, the government, and the commoners.
Yeah.
The electorate and the persons.
I should have acts and statutes really between government and commoners, because that's the rules they have to obey. But yeah, the commoners are the bottom rung. If you're a citizen of the United Kingdom, you are at law. And this is actually across the Commonwealth, because across the Commonwealth, they all have Houses of Commons. So they're all known as commoners. And a commoner is a third-class citizen of state. That is what a commoner is. You're a third-class citizen.
Charming, isn't it? The most powerful position in governance. We also have to mention the other positions that we can be in at law outside of being a state-owned person, and that is the position of people, which we've obviously been sort of pushing towards, which is the most powerful position you can be in and is recognised as such at law and by the state, the very persons which currently control you as their citizens. So yes, so all these people, the judges and all, they're all persons, and if you choose to be a people, then they're below you, as we just saw in the diagram. On this earth, at law and in terms of governments, you are either a people or a person, and by electing to become a citizen commoner of the state, you become a person by default, which, as you've just said, is the lowest of the state and carries no authority. By registering the legal name on the electoral roll and by voting, you leave that highest position at law, that of a people, and you become a commoner, a third-class citizen. And that's a very important thing to understand, isn't it?
That's very, very important bit. Yeah. And that's why I said at the start that unfortunately David's premise for this petition has been undermined, because he claims to be one of the people and wants the oath to be by the people, for the people sort of thing. So if you don't understand what the difference between a people and a person, or a British citizen or subject, then you're never likely to get out of that citizenship of the state. You first have to realize there's another jurisdiction that you can be in to be able to go there. So yeah, we spoke about that in great detail in some of our other podcasts.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to skip down to number 5. And on the website, on the capillary wave, there's lots more information to help you sort of get your head round this person-people thing, and the legal fiction and all of that, and what the name in capital letters and all of that really means if you're completely new to it. But most of my viewers, I would imagine by now, having had some of this rammed down them, will be fairly on the way. So here we go. A rebuttal to the merits of this petition and others. Citizens believing that they are a people. And again, we've sort of hinted at why you couldn't be a people and write a petition, because you'd be just in the wrong jurisdiction. So Clive has shown that to be one of the electorate, you will have made an application to be enlisted on the electoral register, and whilst your name is still on the electoral roll, there is written evidence supported by yourself in application forms of your consent to the system governance and your vow to a new lord, i.e. not God, to become a member of the new house in a district of the state, whereby the lord or officer can make and distress personal property, as is under his guardianship in his ward. There's a lot of legal terms in there.
Yeah.
This is clearly a two-tier system available on earth for the people of God and for the persons of the state in operation. It's a very sad thing that this is not taught in school, so that when you come of age, you can make the choice yourself. So it is, people don't know that they have been funneled into being persons.
This is like you say, not taught in schools because it would take the authority away from the local authority. So
Yeah.
yeah,
The fact of the matter is that we do not understand the system very well, and we have been acting as one of the state persons, which is the lowest form of society, a commoner, belonging to the House of Commons. A commoner is third-class citizens, as you said, and in the gutter of law and governance, which is why a lot of people do not really understand why they're being treated so badly by the state, because they don't have any jurisdiction or a leg to stand on, so to speak.
yeah, that's right.
The evidence how few actually understand the technicalities of law and governance, or even their own standing as a person of the state. So this petition will serve as a reminder that no people can ever be in a position to sign a petition, because to be able to sign a petition, you have to either be a British citizen or a UK resident. I mean, the point is, if you're of the people, you don't need these tools. These tools are completely irrelevant, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly.
So anyway, so people can have a look at this. It's impossible to be one of the people if you can sign the petition, as we've been saying all the way through. Now, the oaths mentioned in the petition are here so that you can look at them on the webpage, and comments on the proposed oath. So now this is interesting, because knowing all that we got, the petition, should it be gone into law, would be a very interesting and somewhat not very useful petition at all. So the proposed oath does not specifically mention God, as does the military oath, which is strange given the stated concern over our Christian heritage. Clearly, God has to be mentioned, doesn't it?
I guess it doesn't have to be mentioned, but it's strange that if you're going to propose a petition about our Christian heritage, then you'd think you'd put God at the top. So the military oath at the moment does mention God, but the proposed one doesn't.
Right. So the proposed oath states British people, and Clive feels it is a mixing of the two jurisdictions that we have evidenced herein. People are under God in one jurisdiction, and citizens are under the state in another. Both are separate and distinct. The author of the petition himself must be a British citizen and UK resident, as we discussed, and therefore a subject of the King to be able to legally author a petition in the first instance, as per the UK government's own rules on petitioning, which we have shown here. Therefore, the author of this petition is not one of the people, but in fact, and at law, he is a subject of King Charles. So again, the petition is pretty much a begging letter to the King, effectively, from the lowest state, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a supplication and a prayer. Yeah.
The petition mentions Christian heritage, and therefore, logically speaking, one would presume that this includes the teaching of the Bible. By removing King Charles from the oath in this proposed petition, the petitioner has removed the defender of the faith, who swears to uphold lively oracles of God. Currently, the military police, MPs and judges, etc., all swear allegiance to the King, who himself swears to uphold God's laws. The military police, judiciary, and all the other citizenry are by default under the royal law, the Bible, by the very fact that their boss, King Charles, is also under the royal law. So it's really just a question of a chain of command, isn't it? But,
yeah.
That single act of removing King Charles from the proposed oath is the biggest move away from biblical teachings and law that Clive can think of. And I mean, if they took away God, I mean, it would be what would happen to us?
Yeah, I mean, I know that isn't the guy's intention who put
No.
he's got genuine intentions, but this is what can happen when we don't understand how we're truly being governed. By removing the king is only in office because of God and the Bible. So if you take the king out, now I've put in here a little photograph of the oath hierarchy. Everyone underneath, all the officers of state swear an oath to the king, and the king swears an oath to God. So they're all under God.
Mm.
So yeah, and even the military swear an oath to God. So by taking the king out and God, well, then it looks like persons will become laws unto themselves.
Yes, which might be a bit of a worry.
Yeah.
So we've got the opening questions and answers as our summary here, which we've done really well on the time doing it this way, Clive, I have to say.
Yeah, no, it's good. Yeah.
It's good. So, first question then was, how does our Christian heritage affect the way in which we are governed and our laws? And the answer is the Bible, clearly, as evidenced, is the ultimate authority on earth, which, may surprise people. That I think a lot of people talk about things like becoming the executor of a trust, or to use the I'm a flesh and blood man argument and various things. And the Bible has been almost cast aside as if it's an irrelevance, which
That's
clearly is
so
a huge
true.
mistake.
Yeah, I mean, this discussion surely will leave no doubt that the Bible plays a fundamental part in everyone's lives.
And question number two then was, what would it mean for law and governance if the king was removed from the oath? And you just answered that a second or two ago. There would be no rule of law. The powers that be are ordained by God, it says. So the persons would be a law unto themselves. Now, some of the persons may say that that's what they want.
Yeah, the Bible doesn't agree, however.
Question three, does the author of the petition seemingly wish to remove God from the oaths? Only the author, of course, can answer that, and hopefully David will come on. And it would be interesting to see his comments now, having gone through all of this.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's the benefit of having an open, honest discussion. I'm not here to put anyone down. Surely we're here to help each other up.
Yes,
And hopefully, you know, that will help.
I totally agree. And so so number four, does the author, by implication, consider himself one of the people, despite being in a position to sign and launch a legal petition? Well, it would be interesting now to see his perception of that and whether he agrees. This is a common misconception and misunderstanding of how law and governance truly works. A lot of persons who create these type of petitions mistakenly believe that they are one of the people, when in fact, and at law, they are a subject, a citizen, or a person of the United Kingdom, in capital letters, notice, and the king and his government. So they can't possibly be one of the people. The phrase is not being used correctly. 5, are British citizens and UK residents the same, legally speaking, as people? I think the audience watching this can answer these questions now.
Yeah.
We have provided lots of evidence to prove that there is a difference between people and persons. And finally, question 6 is it the government's duty to serve the citizens? And of course, the answer is no. Citizens are commoners at law belonging to the House of Commons, commoners of the lowest rank in society, that being third-class citizens. It is not the job of the state to serve the citizens serve the state. And there we are. Look, you see how much power you could have if you only knew. I love
Isn't
that.
that's so true. If ever a drawing encapsulated the truth, it's that, I think. Yeah.
So having gone through that, Clive, and thank you so much for putting that together, because that really is very, very concise, evidence-based. People can have a look at it. Be interested what people say in the comments. That there'll be all sorts of things, I'm sure.
I can't take all the credit for that. I have to thank my website guy who worked very hard to put that together. So thank you, Slim.
Yeah, no, thank you, Slim, for that. And of course, people can join the website. There's a free half, so you get lots of information on free. And of course, if you want more, then to help you do all your research and stuff, there's a small membership as well. But just to sum up on that, the points that we've gone through, I think taking away the petitions and that the being of the people is clearly a beneficial role. Because you cut out all of the nonsense.
Yeah, and it's not as easy and straightforward as it sounds. Clearly, Jesus got a pretty rough treatment, and so did the rest of his followers for doing so. In a world governed by governments who
Yes, that's true, isn't it? Sorry,
Yeah,
mate. There's a guy here with a handful of nails, and what is that? A wooden? I know. Don't do it to me.
yeah, and that is very true. It can be a tough path to follow, as I'm sure many Christians will verify. But yeah, it's down to once you've got the facts, then whether, as you said earlier, we all got a choice, haven't we?
Yeah, and I mean the other thing is that the government understand this implicitly, and if you approach them in the correct way, they do accept it. They're not just going to dismiss you. I mean, as you said, it might be you might have to jump through a few hoops to get to that. It's not an
Yeah.
impossibility, but they do implicitly understand their position.
It's in their laws and it's in the Bible. There's a line they can take their arguments to, but then they must back down. If you're
Right.
making the correct arguments, obviously you're not making a correct argument if you think you're one of the people signing a petition. That
Yeah.
is an impossibility. That's a contradiction. That's not true.
And being on the electoral roll and voting for governments has very much put you in as a person in the game, and whatever comes out is really it's nothing to do with you because you've just agreed to be right at the bottom of the pile.
That's so true, and the black belt barrister himself has mentioned that too, and that is true. We consent to that system.
Fantastic. Well, listen, Clive, we're just coming up to the hour now, so I really appreciate your time and going through that. I'm sure that we'll have cause to drip this message out again, perhaps in a different sphere of law than in petitions. But I really appreciate you coming on the show. It's been absolutely brilliant. And once again, thanks for putting the website, because that really helped, because it can be quite complicated to take people down this journey.
Exactly. Lawyers and barristers study for years and years. We're never in an hour going to be able to explain the entire system, but people can get their teeth into some of it at least and help
Yeah.
them understand a little bit better.
Brilliant. Clive, it's been a joy as ever. Thank you so much.
I've enjoyed it, Richard. I hope your audience enjoy it as well.
Well, it'll be interesting to see the comments. Do let us know what you think about all of this. If you've used these arguments yourself, then we'd be fascinated to hear that, how well it's gone, and what you think of all of it. But in the meantime, we better go. Thanks to Clive. The link will be in the description, so you can follow the webpage, of course. And the webpage has all those other links which you can follow. Until next time, from Clive and I, thank you for watching. Cheerio.